guys never do that for me. It must be the secretary.
Well, good afternoon. I want to commend all of you. We heard that it was one of the more efficient photo lines that you all made it through, followed good directions, and worked well. And Mike Polsinelli didn't throw everyone off of their game and give them a hard time. The poor mayor may never recover. Okay, we're going to start off with some introductions. Then I'd like to do a welcome for the Secretary and for the Congresswoman as well. And then we'll talk a little bit, some opening questions that we have for you, Mr. Secretary, and for you, Congresswoman. And then we'll open up to you as well. And some of you know that early in my career I was a teacher, so don't worry if you don't have a question. I have one for you. I know how to call on you. I know you do already. We've had some good pre-conversations and so forth. So let me start with, and I know everyone is at least aware of, and now you've all had the opportunity to meet the Secretary. It really is a great honor for us to have you here in Morris County, at County College of Morris. It's been a flurry of activity and excitement, but truly it's our honor to have you here. Thank you. We appreciate it, and thank you for the work that you do as well. And our Congresswoman we get to enjoy more frequently, but Secretary, you are always welcome back here in any way that we can help you and so forth. But the Congresswoman's here regularly, kind of a local hero, and we appreciate the support that she offers. She and her staff are always available, and by that I mean there's Saturdays that we call, there's evenings and so forth, and that call is always taken. They're always here for us, and they're great advocates for our students, for our college, and for the community. We appreciate that as well. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more extensively about the building and the programs, and you'll get some very good tangible examples of the kind of support that we get and so forth. So we're going to make introductions. There's a lot of people here today. We could easily go through 2 hours just introducing all of you. All of you are of enormous importance, and we appreciate the work that you do and in your communities and the support you show my college and the other colleges that are represented here as well. But in the interest of time, we're going to try to be brief, and we're going to simply stick to an introduction of elected officials. We believe we have a complete list. If somehow you're not on the list, please accept my apologies in advance, and we'll make a little time to just introduce yourself should we miss it. We don't think we have. Kelly and I have worked hard pulling this together. We feel confident we can become wedding planners and organize a lot after this. So I'm going to start with Morris County. We have our Commissioner Director, Typhoon Sullen, who is with us today. And we have our Sheriff, James Gannon. Also with us is Randolph Mayor Marie Potter. Dover Mayor Carolyn Blackman. I have to tell you a funny story. When I called the mayor, I said, Mayor, I can't tell you who it is at this point, but you want to be here? And she said, Tony. I said, Mayor, trust me on this one. and indeed you did. We also have with us former Governor and Senator Richard Cody, and sir, thank you for being with us. Also a great honor. From Passaic County, we have Commissioner John Bartlett. Mr. Bartlett's also the chairman of the NJTPA. We have with us Commissioner Bruce James. I believe Mr. James is with us. Okay, not here yet. From Pompton Lakes, we have Councilman Eck Venon. And in neighboring Essex County, we have Bloomfield Mayor Mike Venezia. Mike is wearing 2 hats. He's also the VP of Human Resources for Essex County Vocational Technical School. And we have Annabelle Ramos with us, a NERC councilman, I believe, is with us today. I don't think not in? Okay, all right. And then Reginald Bledsoe, Director for the Office of LGBTQ Affairs. Okay, to ensure we did not miss any elected officials, are there any elected officials that we be careful when I come through your town? Okay, no, very good. That's great to hear. And again, we do appreciate everyone being here today. It will lend, I think, to the richness and the importance of this meeting. So let me begin by saying again, it truly is an honor. I think that you're going to see some things that we think are unique and we're very proud of in Morris County. And one of those is the tremendous spirit and the amount of cooperation that goes on throughout our county. Congressman, you see that and you know that. And the cooperation that often goes on across the counties and across the state as well. We are an area that clearly recognizes and can agree on several things regardless of where our political beliefs or other beliefs may lie. And that is, number one, we want the most and best opportunities for students in this community, period. We want great workforce opportunities for adults in this community. We recognize the pandemic has really changed things. I know my colleges and other presidents will likely tell you that we're seeing very large numbers of career changers, and we're happy to be able to respond to that quickly and get people back to work. That means a great deal of us to be able to serve in that way. We agree on other issues as well, but predominantly we want strong, healthy communities that we really care about and that everyone can be included in a way that is meaningful. And that is something that our commissioners, thank you, Commissioner Director, our mayors take a great part in, our state legislators, and Congresswoman Sherrill. So no matter what the issue is, there are others that we can all agree on and we'll work hard on. And a tangible example of that is this building itself. The building came together and started with the support of Megan Huncher, who's the president for the Morris County Chamber. And we heard a lot from manufacturers saying we need to hire more. We're not at full production. This is pre-pandemic. And we'll back you and support you. Our state legislators hosted the Manufacturing Caucus, and a large amount of money was put together for grant funding. So the building actually came together with the support of state funding, and architects on that were our local legislators, Tony Bucco and Steve Oroho. Our county commissioners provided the other half of the funding and spent a lot of time with us at the table with a lot of care of how do we maximize opportunity for people in Morris County, which was essential. Our Randolph Township mayor and her team really worked very hard and so forth. So it's a story of collaboration. And then the industry came together and said, if you can get the building out of the ground, we'll equip it, and we'll provide scholarships and so forth. And they have really honored that over and over again. So the building itself is just a wonderful example of collaboration. I'm fortunate to have a great board, and they really helped us vision that. There are other buildings coming, and you'll probably get to hear about that because those are partnership buildings, as this one is as well. So we're happy to be able to say coming soon. Just indicates a little bit more progress as well. So let me introduce a little bit more formally the secretary, and students pay attention. Sometimes the students will say, how do I get that job? How do I become that? Which I think is a great question. It's exciting, right? So students in particular, pay attention. The secretary is a graduate of Harvard College and Oxford University, attending the later on a Rhodes Scholarship. From 2009
So that's easy.
Actually, the rest of it gets a lot harder. From 2009 to 2017, he was an intelligence officer in the United States Navy Reserve, attaining the rank of lieutenant. He was mobilized and deployed to the war in Afghanistan for 7 months in 2014. He's a member of the Democratic Party. He was the 32nd mayor of South Bend, Indiana from 2012 to 2020, which earned him the nickname Mayor Pete. You've probably heard Patrick's story already. His wife was so excited. She wanted to come down with her Mayor Pete shirt. So the first thing my mom said when I told her, she's like, Mayor Pete, I would like to come. She's in Florida. She's not coming. As the Secretary of Transportation, he reinstated President Obama's pilot program, which ensures local hiring for public works projects with the goal of helping minorities and disadvantaged individuals, something that is near and dear, and something that College of Morris also shares that value and works very hard to ensure those opportunities are made available, not to some people, to all people. In June of 21, the White House created a task force to address supply chain disruptions with the Secretary as one of its leaders. Prioritized the construction of the Gateway Rail Tunnel project. You know about that.
I've heard of it.
All right. Due to its economic significance as well. And his 2020 education plan included a $700 billion investment in universal full-day childcare and pre-kindergarten for all children from infancy to age 5. Proposed tripling Title I funding for schools serving students predominantly from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and among many other things, also included a plan for debt-free college, called for expanding Pell Grants for low-income students. There's a lot of educators in the room, and I can say thank you from all of us to you, particularly on that issue. The Congresswoman, who many of you know more, represents the 11th Congressional District. After graduating from the United States Naval Academy in 1994, Congresswoman Sherrill spent almost 10 years on active duty in the United States Navy. Students, are you getting inspired at this point? This is quite extraordinary, right? She flew missions throughout Europe and the Middle East as a Sea King helicopter pilot, worked on the battle watch floor in the European theater during the Iraq invasion, and served as a flag aide to the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the United States Atlantic Fleet. Congresswoman Sherrill also served as a Russian policy advisor and worked on the implementation of our nuclear treaty obligations and oversaw the relationship between the United States Navy and the Russian Federation fleet. Congresswoman Sherrill also attended law school after leaving the Navy in 2003. She earned her degree from Georgetown University, following which she worked as a lawyer and eventually joined the United States Attorney's Office in New Jersey. Congresswoman holds a bachelor's degree from the United States Naval Academy and a master's degree in global history from the London School of Economics and Political Science. And Mr. Secretary, if I'm not mistaken, you also hold a degree in history. Mm-hmm. We all hold degrees in history. So students, whenever you ask that question, what can you do? You look at those two. Okay? All right. Committee assignments. Congresswoman Sherrill serves on the Committee for Armed Services. She is the vice chair for the Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, also serving on the Subcommittee for Intelligence and Special Operations. She also serves on the Committee for Science, Space, and Technology, is the chair for the Subcommittee on the Environment, and serves on the Committee of Education and Labor, the Subcommittee for Higher Education and Workforce. In terms of education, she supports the expansion of workforce development programs, increasing protections for student loan borrowers, advocates for doing more to support 2- and 4-year vocational programs that lead directly upon a job upon graduation. So clearly we are all in the right room on the same page in the discussion today as well. The purpose of today's meeting essentially is to share with the Secretary what you're working on. Individuals represent education, but we also have a large number of manufacturers in the room, elected officials, business owners, and community leaders as well. So I think you'll get a good earful. And we encourage you to ask questions to the Secretary and the Congresswoman as well, okay? With that, I'm going to go ahead and simply, we'll start with the questions. And Mr. Secretary, we're going to start with a question for you. And Congresswoman Sherrill, feel free to slip in. We have one designated directly for you as well. One of the great struggles since the pandemic began has been an issue with supply chain logistics, the inability to manufacture at a rate that matches consumer demands, chip shortages, et cetera. Can you speak to what's being done to alleviate the challenge and to provide greater support for manufacturers as well as colleges who are educating the workforce? And in that, perhaps some conversation about just infrastructure bills and so forth.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I just want to thank you for hosting us. Really impressed with what we've seen here. You've got a lot to be proud of. It reminds me of some of the things we were solving toward a decade ago when I was working with our community college system when I was mayor. And the key to or a key to success is the integration of employers with educators. And seeing how you've made that work here is really impressive. And of course, I want to thank Mikie Sherrill, the Congresswoman you should know has been encouraging me to come to the district from before I even got this job. And particularly pleased to be here in Morris County to see for myself what you've been talking about. And among many other things, we have the Congresswoman to thank for her support for this bipartisan infrastructure law, which is a generational investment in the future of transportation in this country. It's the reason why I have, I believe, the best job in the federal government, which is building the future. There's never been, I think, a better time to be involved in transportation, infrastructure, construction, because of the resources that we have to actually address some of these challenges that have built up for a very long time, including our supply chain challenges. So, a big part of why we see difficulty moving goods around the country is that while our supply chains are the private sector operations for the most part, and rightly so, they depend on public sector infrastructure. We're responsible for financing and funding highway infrastructure and bridges and roads and port infrastructure that was allowed, frankly, to get out of date. And those are issues that built up over decades. They've caught up to us. And then alongside that, of course, happened the economic shocks associated with COVID-19 and the recovery from it. And the result is that we are having to work short, medium, and long-term solutions all at the same time in order to address this. For the short term, we have launched through this task force that Tony mentioned, collaborations that bring together the public and private sector, that encourage data sharing among all of the different players, from terminal operators at the ports to warehouse owners 1,000 miles inland. We've engaged rail companies. We're working to recruit more truck drivers, and critically to make it the kind of job where people build a career and stick with it rather than looking for other places to work. All in order to make sure that we can get through this season while also making the investments that are going to help us get through the next decade and make sure that we're competitive for decades to come. Where everybody here comes in is that the implementation of this law, the delivery of these resources that Congress and the president have entrusted departments like mine to get out there and make a reality, largely depend on the human infrastructure, the human capital, the skill sets and the workforce of those who are going to be called on in jobs that are increasingly demanding and sophisticated, whether they involve college degrees or not. In fact, the truth is, we will only succeed in delivering on this $1.2 trillion investment if we leave no talent on the table. If every ounce of potential is realized among all of the people who are going to be needed in roles from architecture and engineering to literally digging the trenches for the fiber optic cable that's going to bring internet to more homes. And that's very much our focus on how we can deliver better infrastructure that will make it possible for everything from goods movement and supply chains to a cleaner, safer, easier commute to work.
Very good. Thank you. And Congresswoman Sherrill, I know that WEO is very important to you, and you've been working on it, have an active voice on that as well. Can you speak to how it will support workforce, employers, and students, and what challenges may exist in completing that?
Sure. So the Secretary spoke about some of what's been passed so that we can begin to address the supply chain shortages, but we're looking in Congress to continue to do more, and one of the ways we're doing more is through WEOA, making sure that we have the workforce. This will be the most we've invested in our workforce in a generation, something that I'm sure many of you can either report because you're elected officials and you're hearing it from your businesses, or because you own businesses and you're experiencing it, is we have a workforce shortage. And so we're looking right now to make sure we're addressing that. We're doing that by investing in union registered apprenticeship programs, which we know these are some of the top tier apprenticeship programs we have. We're also looking to make sure that we have funding to ensure that, in fact, we're going to do some of this through the NDAA to make sure that we have extra spaces for veterans as we're doing that skills bridge plan so that they can get into some of these great apprenticeship programs. Also, other apprenticeship programs that will be evidence-based. So I come from a background of criminal justice reform, and I can tell you that as we are helping people get into some of these retraining programs, not all apprenticeship programs are created equal. So we want to make sure these are evidence-based, that we know that these are programs that if people are going to take time to do, they're going to have a job at the other end of it, and they're going to have a good paying job. So these are some of the things that we put into the WEOA authorization so we can make sure that for all of you out there now that are saying, we're ready to go, we are flourishing, we are ready to go, we just need the workforce to do it, that we're going to make sure that you have that workforce.
Good, and thank you for that. We recognize students have different needs and interests. Not everybody wants a four-year degree or more. Some want to go right into the workforce and meet their passion that way. Thank you for helping them. Mr. Secretary, a final question for you, open to the audience. The nation's community colleges are increasing their partnerships with industry and with one another. We see a lot of activity between the Department of Transportation and the Department of Labor also merging to address issues. Can you talk briefly about that?
That's right. Yeah, we've been teaming up with the Department of Labor in a number of areas because, again, we recognize that the delivery of great infrastructure and transportation and the availability of a great workforce are inseparable. And it helps that we have in Secretary Walsh a fellow former mayor. I think we view things in very similar ways. But I've seen very directly how the strength of our educational, vocational, and community college resources really directly bears on our potential as a department and as a country. Matter of fact, one of my colleagues, Vin White, is a CCM alum who has brought that background and skills to a senior role where he advises on how we're handling innovation, which, I mean, innovation in transportation right now is really a story of how to make sure that all these technologies actually make people better off. Yeah, we're just looking at those robots out there in one of the stops on our wonderful tour that we just had. And what you see is, on the one hand, the robot is doing things that human beings used to do repetitively. And on the other hand, it's very clear that we're going to need skilled workers to run the robot. It's not that the jobs have disappeared, it's that the jobs have changed and they require more training and skill than ever. And they require periodic refreshing in a different way than the past. So transportation is one of many sectors where I think we're moving out of the model of, you go to school or you go get your training, you get your skill set that you're going to have for the rest of your life, and then you go get your job that you're going to have for the rest of your life. And we're much more in a world where people are changing jobs, sometimes changing careers more frequently than certainly my parents' generation would have changed titles. And that's going to require a constant back and forth instead of just saying, are you in the workforce or are you getting educated? Being both, sometimes at the same time. And we want to encourage through everything from registered apprenticeships to community college partnerships, ways to build that up because it is a huge part of the lifeblood of our communities and our economy.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to open the first audience question before we just open up to all to Dr. Aaron Fickner, the president for the New Jersey Council of County Colleges, and ask that he talk for a few minutes about NJ Pathways, which is a unique system designed to pull education industry even more closely together and address supply labor issues predominantly. Dr. Fickner?
Thank you, President. Nice to meet you, Secretary and Congresswoman. Good to be with you. We fully understand that we're living in a rapidly changing world. You mentioned the innovation that's going on in transportation. You mentioned the huge skills mismatch that we have. So we launched our NJ Pathways initiative with some significant investment from the legislature and the governor. And we are bringing our 18 community colleges together in a partnership with the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, and Chris Emmaholtz is here. They're the largest industry association in New Jersey because we know that what we do has to be driven by the needs of employers. But we know we've got to work together, and so we're happy to be here working with everyone from organized labor to the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program, to employers, to high schools, to four-year colleges, because we've got to do a better job of building those pathways to those good-paying jobs. And so we're focusing on setting up centers of workforce innovation and construction infrastructure, data science, manufacturing, and these are groups of colleges working together with high schools to develop new curriculum and new programs to meet the challenges that all of you mentioned. So we're really excited that you're here to talk about the federal perspective and to find ways that we can support your vision. Congresswoman, what you talked about in WIOA is an important part of what we need to do, bring workforce development to the table. We've got to find new ways to collaborate, and I know you all are at the federal level are doing a lot to encourage and support that, and we appreciate that effort.
That's great. And I'm glad to hear that you're reaching into the high schools as well, because we've got to cultivate and nourish that interest in these kinds of careers early. And we got to make sure people realize that a lot of these career fields don't look like they might assume that they did, right? We've done a lot on the manufacturing side, for example, certainly where I come from in the industrial Midwest, just to physically get some of these students into these facilities so they can see, first of all, that they're just better, cleaner, brighter places to work than they might have imagined from their grandfather's factory. And secondly, so that they can see how demanding it'll be to get those good paying jobs there and why they should be getting ready to skill up.
Yeah, the high school piece is critical. Our community colleges have great relationships with their vocational technical high schools, but we need to redouble that so that that 16-year-old knows what that path is and it's clearly laid out for them to a community college, to a registered apprenticeship program, to a four-year degree.
That's great.
This is really, as I was talking to the mayor, the secretary.
Yeah, that's a compliment.
That's
always a compliment.
Right? Telling him that that's really the lifeblood of what we do here is having this incredibly talented, skilled workforce. As all of us know, working here in New Jersey, we're working on affordability, but it's not an inexpensive place to locate a business. We do care very deeply about our environment because we have flooding issues, because we have Superfund sites. So there's a lot that it takes to open up a business here, but people do it again and again and again, decade after decade after decade, because we are the most talented workforce in the nation. And so making sure that we are doubling down on that and investing on that. And I know that NJMEP, NJBIA have been so important to this program. And I also just want to call out our chamber, because I know here in Morris County, they're constantly looking at, we have our great educational institutions here, which is where we get so many wonderful people, but we're also working to claw back all those students that leave us for a little while to make sure that we have that really talented, innovative workforce of tomorrow. So thank you.
Very good. And Chris, I don't know if you want to follow up. Aaron mentioned BIA.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Arcona. And thank you very much, Secretary Buttigieg and Congresswoman Sherrill. big fans of everything you guys are doing, because I know infrastructure, innovation, workforce development are the three pro-growth spending that we appreciate and we need more of, and you guys are focused on that, so we appreciate that, and thank you very much. Aaron, County College is a fantastic partner, and the reason why they're a great partner is they're accessible to everybody in the state, and everybody knows their county college, everybody knows the great programs. CCM is a fantastic leader and does great things here, but throughout the state, Aaron's members are all doing a great job, and we're happy to partner with them because we need that public-private partnership to work. And the great thing about the county college is also they're bringing in private career schools, the trade unions, MEP, as Aaron said, the high schools. We have to work together to share what we think works best, and so we talk to our members, and we have 10,000 throughout the state, and you've talked about affordability and regulatory burdens, but lately we're saying, what's the top issue? It's workforce, workforce, workforce. They can't find good people. And it's more acute in technical, manufacturing, STEM areas, but it's across the board. Healthcare is a big one, and so the work the county college is doing fantastic, and we appreciate that, but really a lot of people are doing it. How can we bring that together? And so we'd love to hear your thoughts on anything you think that we can do better on bringing that together with WIDS and one-stop centers in WIOA, with the K-12 system, with the out-of-career, out-of-college folks. How do we align that so that we're all on the same page?
So I think a lot of the people that we're looking to get involved in this are people that have other challenges. So if you're a single parent raising children, you can't take off 4 to 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Even if it's that short of a period of time, you need that paycheck. You need to pay your bills. So making sure that, I think it's wonderful what you're doing to have grant programs so people can attend for free, but that's not even enough, right? They need subsidies to make sure that as they're doing their training, they're still able to pay the rent, pay for gas, et cetera. So I think that's one area, and the secretary might have more ideas on it because I know he's been thinking about it. The other thing that I think we're starting to do here is, and maybe all of you can lend a little color to it, but is looking at how our network of sort of, as you were raising, community colleges, other educational institutions, apprenticeships, how we create this net across New Jersey so people have access to all the great programs, because we don't need to replicate. I mean, it'd be very expensive to try to, at every community college, replicate what we're doing at CCM. But then there are other programs elsewhere in Passaic and Essex and Sussex that are doing fantastic programming as well. So how do we make sure students across the state are aware of the different programs, have access to that, and then again, if they're going to have to come here, because some of what you're doing is very hands-on, how are we going to get them here? How are they going to have the transportation? I know you're giving some Uber cards, but how, what does that wraparound program look like so that we can provide all of our talented students who we want in the workforce a way to do that? And then I would be remiss if I did not mention that childcare in this state is possibly among the most difficult things to do in the nation. Our state has one of the highest needs and lowest availability of childcare across the nation, and it has gotten worse. And I can tell you, as a working mom of 4 school-age kids, it was a debacle years ago, and it is worse now. So where we used to have 2 kids for every spot, we now have at least 5 kids for every child care spot, and it is getting worse. So if we are going to have the workforce we need, we have got to address the child care crisis that's going on in this country. I'll just end by saying, in over half the states in this nation, just for all of you who haven't had the nightmare of handling this, in over half the states in this nation, center-based infant care is more expensive than state college tuition. That is what our workforce is facing as they're trying to get into the workforce. But with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Secretary.
Wow. No, amen to that. I mean, first of all, ever since becoming a parent a few months ago, I have a whole new appreciation for the things I always believed in a policy level, but now at a very visceral level about
We can't get
childcare.
childcare. I will say in D.C., it's actually the most expensive. So
Yeah, I was just doing the math. I was thinking, and I could probably enroll and so you get a pilot's license or something. It'd be a lot cheaper than the childcare. Look, we've been talking a lot about how to get people into these paths and into these workforce opportunities who haven't historically had access because they've belonged to a group that's been systematically excluded, or it's just not family tradition to be in these fields. And we got to do it both because it's the right thing to do from an equity perspective and because we literally cannot afford to leave any talent on the table if we are to get these big, ambitious projects done on time, on task, and on budget. So as I've canvassed around asking what are some of the barriers, One I hear is transportation. It's ironic, but in order to get a job in transportation, you need transportation to the work site where you're going to do the transportation job. So getting creative about that is going to be very important. Childcare is a massive issue. Finding ways to support people financially while they're training, even if it's just for a few weeks, can be an absolute game changer for people's access to this. The other thing I would just mention for those, and again, I'm talking to an audience that's very fluent and literate and comfortable in the mechanics of some of these tools and programs for workforce development, is the importance of demystifying them for everybody else. I mean, I was on the WIB in my city as mayor, and it took more than a year for me to figure out what was going on in there. The acronyms, the complexity of it can be really daunting when there are employers, not to mention potential workers who would benefit so much from plugging into the system. And so sometimes it takes somebody who stands just a little bit apart from it in the business community, or an elected official, or somebody who has access to that world but remembers how to translate it into plain English, to make it feel just a little more accessible for the people who could benefit the most from getting connected up.
Thank you.
Very good, and thank you. That's of critical importance. I'm glad to see it's recognized. Transportation is definitely an issue. We find, and I think the other presidents would agree, it's not academics that sideline our students typically, it's life. So we offer child care grants, you can get a family of 6 groceries for a month and renew till you graduate, and it scratches the surface, right? It's federal funding that provides that, it's community partnerships that provide that, support from our county and so forth, but really it just scratches the surface. So as you're working in DC and so forth, greater advocacy and greater amounts. If we get those students over the hump of what life challenged them with, they can get to that better place and really, really live out their dreams and benefit everyone, quite frankly. So I appreciate you recognizing that. Other questions, comments, sharing? President Conley.
I'm going to stand just because I feel like it's the polite thing to do. So, is there anything that you folks have mentioned? Because as I sit here, you're answering all my questions. So, which is wonderful. But I wonder, as you are sitting here, what is the opposition that you folks face with respect to all these things that you're talking about? Some of these things involve money. Some of these things involve incentivizing how we connect and how we create those connections. But politics are what they are, and the federal government is a very large entity. So I guess there are 2 pieces to this. A, we would love to know what are the things that perhaps we need to do on our side to help to simplify your efforts to try to assist us because of its complexity. The second thing, would be, are there things, we've all talked about the things we need more of to do. We need to take action with this, we need more of that. Sometimes we need to do less to free people to innovate. Could you both talk a little bit about that cutting edge there? I'd appreciate it.
That's a great thought-provoking question. One thing the great thing about infrastructure work compared to some other public policy challenges is I think there's a healthy level of understanding, not universal, but there's a healthy level of understanding about why we need to do it. It's why this is legislation that moved on a bipartisan basis in a Washington where people didn't think you could do anything on a bipartisan basis. And so I think a lot of the challenge now is more about delivery. I think we do need to address concerns that are out there by making clear our seriousness about making this work for everybody. From making sure that a planned investment in a neighborhood is going to be done in a way that is done with neighbors, not to them, to making sure that we're stressing the job creation and making good on the potential of the job creation of electric vehicles or new technology, which, I'm looking at the electrical workers, it represents huge opportunity, right? But also concern and fear for a lot of folks who are used to working, for example, in an automotive sector that was based on a certain model, and now it's shifting. So there are areas where we just need to recognize where the push-pull is and lean into making it work for everybody. In terms of what there needs to be less of, I think we need to get out of our own way a little bit in regulatory frameworks that assume an old world that's changing. So I'll give you one example. My department can tell you exactly where you need to put the mirror in a car that is self-driving. Because the regs were written that way. They actually don't require a driver, but they do require a mirror. We have airbag regulations that would apply to an automated vehicle that refer to the driver's side and the passenger side that no longer are intelligible, right? So there are things we've got to do to maintain our very high standards and expectations around safety, environmental, labor, and other policy needs, but also modernize it. And getting the input from what people are seeing on the ground as they are innovating, especially the ideas that are coming out of the collaborations between the public, private, and academic sectors. Mike and I were talking earlier about Bell Labs and what that means and what that has meant, right, in terms of the creation of basic research that people didn't even realize some of the implications it would have, right? We don't have to see everything that's coming, but we have to create a nimble enough atmosphere on everything from regulation to workforce development to do well across all of the changes that are going to hit us, because I'm fairly sure that the 2020s will be the most transformative period for transportation that we've had probably since the 1920s. And I'm also fairly sure that some of the curveballs that come at us will not be, that will have mattered most by the end of this decade, will not be the ones we saw coming. Some things we know are coming. We got drones, we got automation, we got electrification. But look at the last decade. The most important piece of transportation technology of the 2010s is the smartphone, which isn't even considered a piece of transportation equipment. Nobody would have guessed when it was invented that it was going to change everything from how you board a plane to how you get directions to how you book a ride. And yet there it was. So being ready for those unknown unknowns, I think, is a real challenge, certainly for us in the policy space, but also for community leaders who are trying to get your students, your workforces, your employees, your citizens ready.
Yeah, I would say that thinking of what challenges we face, who's standing against these ideas, I actually feel like there is less opposition now to these ideas than there has been in decades. It feels like for the first time we are taking on these challenges. I don't know how all of you felt a couple of years ago, but I mean, I just felt like we were stuck in this country. Like I said, I come from a background of criminal justice reform. Everyone knew just throwing your money at the BOP was not going to ever get you the results you wanted, but nobody would even talk about investing in Head Start programs. We talk about healthcare, and everyone can tell you that having good preventative care costs less than treating any litany of illnesses that happen when you don't do that. But we couldn't seem to really talk about engaging on the front end. It seemed like all we could do here was address the crisis, not prevent that from coming or do better. And now I just feel like that is not the case. When we're talking about this infrastructure bill, when we're finally getting the Gateway Tunnel funded, we're not waiting for the Hudson River tunnels to implode. We're actually going to address that on the front end and make sure that we have a better future for people here. So all of this feels very possible to me. And certainly, you know, some of what I've discussed, like childcare, wasn't possible through a massive piece of legislation, but it has been possible in New Jersey because the governor's using the ARP funding that we passed. And that's freed up a lot of innovation and ideas. And so it feels like we are on the leading edge of a very innovative time period that I think is, you know, I look at our students and I just think, wow, I mean, how exciting. You guys are going to be living through some amazing technology innovations that are coming. And I just think it's going to be started here because of the investments we're doing now. So this is the first time we've invested more in infrastructure than China in 20 years. We are just opening up, I think, innovative pathways for the future that is going to be really exciting for us. And then as far as what we should do less of, you know, the secretary stole my answer a little. I shouldn't have told him about Bell Labs. But I think too much we've only put money into things that we could make money off of. So we've only said, okay, here's the problem I have. This smartphone needs to do this, so I'm going to hire a bunch of smart people to just single-mindedly focus on how we're going to get it to do this, as opposed to the Bell Labs model saying, I'm going to give a bunch of smart people the ability to do research and development of basic science, to discover new things. I can't tell you as I go around this district how many amazing things happen from Bell Labs, not because Bell Labs said, I want you to look into optics and create this lens that's going to do X, Y, or Z, but because Bell Labs said, hey, you're a physicist, what can you do different than is being done now? And we'll figure out what that means to the economy and what that means to business. And we are now investing in research and development, and it couldn't come too soon. Because I sit on the House Armed Services Committee, and when I deal with issues related to China, I am telling you for the first time, I'm not feeling like as an American, we are surpassing everybody and we are leading the pack. I am feeling like we are kind of at a point where we need to step up our game a little bit on research, development, innovation, and now is the time that we're doing it. So right now, this feels like a very exciting time for me.
It is indeed an exciting time. And you mentioned students. I want to make a little bit of space for them and their faculty as well. You got to look at what's going on in their classrooms and labs and so forth. They're touching the future. Professor Oskamp brought the NASA Hunch program with Superintendent Moffitt and his team and so forth. So to our professors and students, are there questions you have? Yes.
Hi, my name is Kaylee. I am a high school student. This question is specifically for Congresswoman Sherrill. So the manufacturing and engineering career path is mainly male-dominated, and so is politics, even though it's gotten a little bit better. What kind of advice would you give to younger women who are looking into this field but may feel a little bit more held back due to what they see around them?
Yeah, that's a great question, one I think about a lot. And I really applaud you for your interest here. And we're working very hard to change that dynamic. In fact, as many of you know, Picatinny Arsenal does a lot of robotics teams throughout the district. And so many of the heads of those teams are young women that I interact with and engage with. So I think change is on the way in that space. But it's certainly something that we keep focusing on. And the advice I would have to you, I'll never forget, I was told when I was a young ensign in the Navy, that we didn't need more women leaders and we didn't need more minority leaders because good leaders were good leaders. And I feel like I got this lecture from somebody, you could just follow good leadership. And kind of like a minute later, I went to work with this one pilot who was the most foul-mouthed. Everyone loved him. He was like a great leader. But and he was saying all kinds of stuff and he was yelling at people all the time. And all I could think was, oh, I'm supposed to do this. That's going to work for me. I'm sure everyone would be like, what the heck is her problem? She's crazy, right? It doesn't work for me. So I think the thing I would say to women is a lot of what ideas, the way we engage, we bring to the table can be slightly different. But double down on that. Don't feel like if you look around, oh, I have to do it this way because this is the way it's gone. And when I say this is the most innovative time, it's not just an innovative time because of technology. It's an innovative time because we're looking at the workforce and what that looks like. And, I got to tell you, quite frankly, being a mom of 4 kids and having a full-time job was tough. It's gotten a little easier as they've gotten more independent, but it's tough. And I think we have opportunities now. When you would say, if I was in my 20s and starting on some of my beginning jobs and I would say, oh, I want to work part-time because I have children, that was called being on the mommy track. And that wasn't good, right? That was, okay, your colleagues are going to go here and you're going to kind of go here. And so I think now these conversations are all on the table what the future of the workforce looks like because quite frankly, we need you. We need to figure out a way to make it really beneficial for you to be in the workforce. We need to make sure you have a way, if you're going to be a mom, and so much of childcare often falls on moms, if you're going to be a mom, then you know exactly what your path looks like. Your kid's going to have a great opportunity to go into great childcare. You're going to have great opportunities. And now, maybe if you're like, dude, I cannot go into the city every single day because, I'm going to have to go to a sing-along on Tuesday, they're like, okay, well, that's great. We got hybrid work. So let's figure that out and make sure that you have this pathway and that it's going to be a benefit to you, but it's also going to be a huge benefit to our economy here. So I think that's a great question.
I'll come right back there, but I want to give a moment to our recent graduate and former student government president, Liam Benny.
Hi, nice to meet both of you. So as a student, we're facing so many different financial adversities with life, and that's just as a student, right?
now you add on top of that what's going on with the world. So we've got the war with Ukraine, and as a result of that, we've also got the ongoing pandemic, and we're feeling the real life effects of both of these things in real time, financially speaking. China has been forced to shut down parts of their country due to the pandemic, and their supply chain is a direct result of that as well. They're shut down as well. So with that being said, how will your workforce and supply programs impact the rising inflation and the price of gas? And then on top of that, with the issue of global inflation that's happening and it's rising, how does this impact the U.S.'s approach, if at all?
Do you want me to?
So a couple of thoughts. Part of what's at stake in getting supply chains right is fighting inflation, actually, right? Because a big part of the upward pressure on prices is shipping costs, and shipping costs are driven partly by these inefficiencies in the system. We were just at the ports of New York and New Jersey earlier today, looking at what could be done to just not have the trucks waiting as long at the gate in order to get their turn to drop off their container. And of course, everything is connected all the way through. Sometimes a ship is waiting off the coast because 1,000 miles inland a warehouse isn't ready for a truck, and that kind of cascades through the system. So what we know is that the steps that we take directly now on infrastructure help give us a more fluid goods movement system that actually helps us fight this upward pressure on prices. That's one piece. A second piece is workforce, where we've got to expand, not just workforce, but we've got to expand the productive capacity of this country. That means investing in infrastructure, it means investing in equipment, investing in knowledge, and investing in people. And to take the Congresswoman's one point from the Congresswoman's response to Kaylee's question, this also means we can't be a country that fails to fully activate the potential of 50% of our population to be doing anything from being a truck driver to being a CEO. So that's part of what's at stake in unlocking everyone's talent and potential. Fuel prices are tough. They're tough for everybody. And they're tough to manage because they largely depend on what's happening in global petroleum markets, right? So what the administration has done is the president led the coordination of countries to release from the petroleum reserve, flexibility on things like ethanol, any short-term measure that would make a difference. But the longer-term answer, of course, includes a stronger, more independent path for American energy. And also, we need to make sure that the other things that we do have more direct control of from a policy perspective that we're acting on, whether it's the cost of childcare, the cost of housing, cost of prescription drugs, cost of education. Some of those things would actually be easier for policy to directly impact than the cost of petroleum. And so we're pushing hard on that, even while working on the things that Congress has already provided for us to do.
And we're trained to provide more because we have the Competes Act, which the Speaker thinks might be voted on through the Congress by the 4th of July. Fingers crossed. So what that would do, I sit on the Defense Critical Supply Chain Task Force because even before we were experiencing some of the supply chain issues that we're seeing now, we knew that our defense supply chain had some issues. We were getting certain pieces of equipment from places like China and Iran. So we really needed to address some of that, have a better understanding, make sure our supply chain was more resilient, make sure we brought some pieces of our supply chain back home if we could, or to more friendly countries. And so now what we're doing with the Competes Act is looking at the pieces of our supply chain to find out what pieces of the supply chain can we bring back home and what can we do here, and then what can we do in more friendly areas of the world so that we'll have an ability to make sure that supply chain's more resilient. And we're looking specifically at those critical pieces. So where are we getting lumber? Where are we getting steel? Where are we getting fertilizer? Where are we getting the pieces of our supply chain that impact us the most? So that we can make sure we don't have these issues to drive down the cost of importing or producing things to keep that inflation lower. Also, chips. So I'm sure you've all heard of it now, right? If I had talked to you about superconductor chip, you know, a couple of years ago, you would have been like, what? You know, what's that? So critical in so many goods now. So there are over 100 chips in a car. There's over 200 in an electric car vehicle. I just talked to Stryker. Many of you are familiar with Stryker, the medical device company here in New Jersey that a lot of our schools send people to. It's a great company, great manufacturing, but they have machines they run on that have chips in them. Their chip went from $8, if they could get it, $8 to $1,000. That's what we're talking in the chips. So with this Competes Act, we are going to open up a chips manufacturing plant in Ohio. Some of you who watched the State of the Union from the President heard Intel has said, you guys pass that Competes Act and we're ready to roll on bringing that back home. That is going to be critical to American manufacturing as well. And those are the areas we're looking at to get prices down, to make sure we have a more resilient supply chain and address inflation.
We're one of 2 schools in the state to have a partnership with Intel. So if you can get them to come here, we've got the students.
Yeah, I tried. They said New Jersey's the last place you want to do it because you need like no noise and we're very noisy people. So it's not going to work here. But yeah, I looked into it.
Roy from Weissog has been waiting a little bit. And we've got some other manufacturers, Josh and Mike Siddell and John Kennedy and a number of others. And then we've got our union heads here from the electrical. They may want some time.
I want to go back a step and specifically answer your question also, Kelly. If you believe that you're looking for a technical career in the sciences or engineering, my answer to you is go for it. Don't be swayed by the fact that you come to County College and, you know, you're in engineering classes and you've got 20 guys and only 3 females. Because by the time you get to me and a company like mine, we are gender blind. We want people that can do the work. We need people that can do the work. We have female PEs that are project engineers. We have quality assurance engineers that are females. We have apprentices that we have a journeyman toolmaker who has her journeywoman's papers and is now running multiple CNC machines in a high state-of-the-art CNC shop. So my answer to you is go for it, okay? And that's to all of you women, all right?
Yes, Scott Moffitt.
Hi, I want to talk to you a little bit about what looks like a movie preview, like but there's a point to the madness that I'm going to talk about, but it's incentivized and aligned, and I think John was talking about it from Sussex the other day. We don't start a lot of new programs unless there's some kind of resource that comes in, right? So there's this pressure on us as a vocational school, a career technical school, to start new programs. But usually it's like eliminate one, start a new one, right? So without incentives, it's almost impossible. The young lady in the front of the room right here is a high school student, I believe? Yeah. A high school student in a program that started with a grant from the state that incentivizes vocationals to work with somebody else to run a program. We open up a program. What do I know about engineering? Nothing, right? So we work with business and industry, John from NJ Met. We bring all these people together to run a program for high school students that lead right into alignment with what's going on, because I had listened to Aaron Fichtner when he was the Secretary of Labor in New Jersey, and they were talking about all the key industries that were coming out, right? Engineering was a big, advanced manufacturing was a big one. I'm not starting at advanced, I don't know enough, right? So incentivizing and aligning those incentives with programs is critical. That building, the only reason it's going up is a long-standing partnership with the D1 CCM and Business and Industry and the county commissioners. But it all started with the state of New Jersey, the voters of the state of New Jersey passing a bond act that was specifically designed to expand vocational schools and opportunities for students. But every program in there has to align with what the state has said is really the key industry sectors moving forward. But if I told you how long ago I started working on that, like I see that mound outside of the parking lot. I got a shovel. I'm ready to go. But we started this years ago. Patrick will tell you. I mean, we've been talking about this program, but it's real. It's finally going to happen. But it only happens because it was incentivized and it's aligned. But otherwise, I am going to continue probably doing a lot of what I usually do, which is fine and good. But we're running a program together with County College, cybersecurity, right? What high school student getting into college wouldn't want a backup, right? Filled to the gills. Engineering, advanced manufacturing, you guys talked about it earlier, it's how do I make it sexy to young students? You know, right? Like, because it's the old mindset. but I can't do that for every industry. That's where, like, as vocationals, I have a couple colleagues here at Essex and at the same. A lot of them have started engineering, and, you know, these programs in manufacturing, but it's recruiting the students and making high school students aware of them and why they're so critical. You know, transportation. I have a global supply chain academy in my high school. I have trouble filling it. They're all interested in finance and international business. I go, no, this is really a really good program. Rutgers designed the curriculum, right? But there's a lot at play. But incentivizing and aligning that with what these trends are is critical. Otherwise, there's not a lot of room for us to grow. We're full already with the program we have. And then working with the college and working with local districts, we're able to do a lot in this county, a network almost, a web that you were talking about, Congressman. In this county, there's programs starting up. I know there's a mayor from Randolph. We're starting a program with Randolph School District next year in partnership with the three of them. I mean, so there's a lot going on, but you need some of that incentivization and alignment. And Perkins is the other thing that Carl D. Perkins funding at the federal government drives a lot of what we do. And when you want alignment, that's where schools like myself and the county college will also be impacted. So that's a lever to pull if there's stuff you want done for schools.
The new building will allow 500 to 600 more high school students to take college courses. And because we wanted to make sure there was no transportation issue for the students, Scott's building will be at CCM on this campus. And then the superintendent and I made an agreement that we will first and foremost make extensive efforts to recruit first-generation, low-income, underrepresented populations again, to make sure they're getting the opportunities that they deserve and we want in our communities too. So it is a really good example. There were a number of other hands that went up. Bernie?
Hi, Bernie Corrigan, president of IBW Local 102. But first and most importantly, as a resident of West Caldwell, proud to call you my congresswoman.
Thank you.
Secretary, thanks for having here. And just, I do want to comment on Tony Iacono. From the day he arrived here from Florida, open door, always answers my call, shares a passion and a vision for providing pathways to students. So it doesn't even have to be about CCM. I call him up with a question about something else, he always takes that call. So thank you, I do appreciate that.
I didn't pay him. We periodically have lunch. I didn't pay him.
I wanted to talk a little bit about our program, and I'll be brief, but want your comments afterwards on why we shouldn't build on it. And I think we're a little bit unique in the labor world that not only do we do our traditional electrical apprenticeship, I went to my trustees back in 2017 and said I wanted to do a tuition reimbursement program for 75%, whether it's college, crane operator, welder, whatever it may be. Coming to CCM, going to Rowan University. Got a lot of pushback from the trustees. You know, you're training people to leave the business, and I looked at it differently. I looked at it as building a relationship, and as an educator, making our employees more agile, better employees, and you know, again, construction's cyclical. There's unemployment times. They may segue somewhere else. They may have an injury. So, you know, again, I'm proud to sit on Pathways with Aaron and work with NJBIA. We were the first labor union to become a member of the New Jersey Business and Industry Association because we believe in private sector growth. Put labor all aside, ultimately that's the way our members go to work. So I guess my comment is, I appreciate Governor Murphy, all his contributions to apprenticeship programs. Why not try to build on the model that's already there? We already have, you know, 53 credits for our program. Why not incentivize, whether it's union or other organizations that have similar programs, to do that, you know, to help me send more people to Tony at CCM or down to Rowan University. Just your comments on that.
So Bernie, I'd love to talk to you a little more about how your program runs. So do you do a certain time as an electrician and then you get credits and then you can, or you get, is it like a GI Bill, I guess, is what I'm asking? Like, you know, in the military, it's an incentive to go into the military because of the GI Bill. So is that some of what you're doing, incentivizing people to go into a trade union with the idea that, and if you want to continue to grow your skills, we'll pay for your college?
We definitely use it as a marketing, but it's not the main reason we do it. We have 500 applications this year for 50 spots. You know, we'll be interviewing 300 people that passed the test, you know, so that's not the issue. For me, it's really about talking with guys like President Iacono and saying, how do we fill the gap somewhere else? Some of our people already have those baseline skills, and maybe they realize going out and working in a ditch isn't for them all the time. I'm okay with providing them that springboard to go somewhere else. So again, we've been fortunate so far that we've been able to fund it. But
How do you fund it?
Our own members, 1.5% of their pay supports the entire JATC program. we operate on a budget of about 2.7 million a year. We have about 250 apprentices. Currently going to college, I have about 23 taking advantage, to be perfectly honest. Not a lot of them take advantage of it yet. I think that 25% gap, sometimes you talk about childcare, sometimes even more expensive for our people because the jobs start at 7 a.m. No daycares are open at 7 a.m.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have to go out and pay even more for a private service to come in and do that. So to say 75% sounds great, but they still got to come up with 25%.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's talk more about it and also about maybe what we could look at for some of the wraparound services and stuff like that. But I think you're right. I think these are the way we grow our workforce. We have people that are going to be very invested in working with their hands, and then people are going to be very invested in working in an office. We can provide all of that to people.
And these things fit together. I mean, I would applaud you for thinking about that in a broader way. We don't know any given year where a certain sector of is going to be really stretched thin, can't find enough people, and another one's going to be a little bit soft. And so the more flexibility you can create, the better, especially right now where it's all hands on deck, right? So one thing we're doing, for example, in the infrastructure bill is we have a program for getting electric buses, buying local transit authorities electric buses. It's great for them. They can save money on fuel. It's great for the community. There's less pollution. We're requiring, if you get our funding to buy that a set aside of that is for workforce preparation. We're not going to dictate exactly how it works. Might be through a registered apprenticeship, might be through a community college, might be through a connection between the two. We've seen a lot of that. And I think the more we think in ways that aren't just in the individual silos and buckets, the better. I've been to your, some of the different facilities that the trades have for training people. And one thing that I hear often is that it's not just the particular skill that is somebody's edge. They get this certification to be able to do whatever underwater welding or whatever the very technical thing is. But a lot of times the actual edge for union contractors is the sense that their folks know how to handle themselves on a job site. Like they have more of the soft skills because they've been through those kinds of training that are also the kinds of things that you can gain through college environments if it's done in the right way. So I think it makes all the sense in the world to find partnerships that are overlapping and to prepare people to have that flexibility and adaptability, even as the particular set of tasks evolves every few years.
So we only have about 2 or 3 minutes left, and I just want to switch gears a little bit so it's not all about manufacturing and offer a moment. We have the president of Morristown Medical Center with us, Trish O'Keefe, if there's anything you'd want to share. And also our sheriff is with us, and for most of the college, we would say our healthcare partners and our criminal justice partners are major partners along with manufacturing. Is there anything you would want to add?
Yeah, certainly, thank you, and thank you very much, Secretary, and our wonderful Congresswoman who's been a great support to us. It is about the partnership, to your comment. Clearly, healthcare has had their challenges, tongue-in-cheek most definitely, and we've lost a lot to the Great Resignation just due to the pandemic. But what we've worked very closely on with CCM is really not having people retire. We want to keep that knowledge in healthcare, in the hospital systems, in our education efforts as well too. But we want to keep them on as faculty, and how do we share faculty and workers together? So we've looked at certain incentives that have worked possibly in the state, but also from a national perspective. Really, we need that nursing faculty, that healthcare faculty, and looking at different partnerships to work together. We've done that with County College from an EMT respiratory perspective, but urge you to please help and continue to focus from a healthcare sector standpoint as well too. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sheriff, final word goes to you.
Yes, President, it's certainly my honor to be here, Secretary, Congressman. I started right, County College of Morris, and I'm very proud of this institution. It's been phenomenal job under your leadership to President. But I see law enforcement changing. I'm the president of state sheriffs throughout New Jersey, and I see it certainly changing. We've all seen it changing. But we're dealing a lot of times with mental health and addiction. We're dealing with homelessness, even in Morris County, top 10 wealthiest county in the United States. We're seeing those types of things, and I think that the job description of the police officer, sheriff's officer has changed. And I really applaud, we've had discussions on this. Law enforcement has always been a strong program here, but other issues, other programs that weave in there where we get people trained, from a crime lab perspective, where you don't need sworn personnel for that. I think it's something to visit, because you have people that want to be in law enforcement, they don't want to be on the sworn side, they want to be in the laboratory side. The cyber side, you've been very successful on partnerships. But, I see from like Hope One's perspective that you're all familiar with, we have a mobile access recovery vehicle where we're out in the community on mental health and addiction services. The sheriff's office, runs that throughout half of New Jersey so far and more to come. So money's always good for those types of things. But, we see with it's not going away anytime soon. We have a global pandemic, but we have civil unrest issues, we have economic downturn, we have hopelessness and loneliness throughout the world, in essence. We really do. And if we get more of that type of curriculum, I think it's going to be helpful, because the police are the first line of defense. I always say the police officers and the emergency room nurses, right? Trish knows that, right? Are the first line of defense out there in the community. So more thrust there, I think, would be very helpful to me, to us, and most importantly, our communities. So just things to think about. It's not going away, and we can make the difference.
Well said.
Okay, and with that, I know we could all well enjoy many more hours. This has been incredibly informative and enjoyable. But our time's come to an end. Would you please join me in thanking the Secretary and our Congressman?
I was tempted to tell everybody I'd stay 2 more hours because I know you're all headed down the shore.